In this lab, I'm going to continue my Palo Alto Firewall lab. I will configure policies to allow outside users to access DMZ web server. We're going to also set policies to allow the inside VLAN 10 users to directly access the DMZ web server, and also allow VLAN 10's users on the inside to access DMZ web server with its public IP address or using its public IP address. So this is the diagram we had before. We added this DMZ on it. So what we're supposed to do is to have VLAN 20 access the DMZ directly, going straight from the firewall to the DMZ, while VLAN 20 is supposed to go all the way to the outside network and then come back to access the DMZ. We're also gonna allow users on the 192.168.100 network to be able to access or view the web server. So first we are going to network and then zones, and we're gonna create this new DMZ zone. So we're gonna add new, call it DMZ, and it's going to be a layer 3. Then we're gonna go back to interfaces and we're gonna configure this 1/3. It's going to be a layer 3 interface. The virtual router is this one and is going to be on the DMZ security zone. The IP address is going to be 10.1.30.254/24. Now we're gonna commit. And we're going to open the firewall and test the connectivity with the web server. Gonna insert the username, say yes to the banner, and insert the password. And then we are going to ping source 10.1.30.254, host, the IP address of the web server, which is 10.1.30.33, and there is connectivity. So we're gonna close this and let's open the web server to see the web page that we are trying to view. So here we're gonna write 127, and this is the web server or the web page that we're gonna be trying to access from different places in this lab. First, we're gonna go back to the firewall. We're gonna start with allowing VLAN 20 to directly access the web server. So we're gonna go to policies. We don't need a NAT policy for this one because there is no NATing taking place in here. So we're just gonna add a new security policy and we're gonna call it VLAN 20 direct to DMZ. So the source is gonna be inside. The source address is gonna be VLAN 20. We don't have users. The destination is going to be the DMZ, and we're gonna create IP address objects for the web server. So the first is gonna be public web server. The public IP address is going to be 192.168.100.233, but we're not gonna use it here. We're gonna add another one, which is the local IP address of the web server. So we're gonna call it local web server, and the IP address is 10.1.30.33, which is the one we're gonna use here. And in application, we're going to only allow web browsing because we're not going to use DNS or anything else. We're just going to type the IP address. So web browsing is enough. And the action is set to allow, and OK, and commit. Now if we go to this PC2 on VLAN 20, and try to access the web server with its local IP address 10.1.30.33, and we are able to access. So we're done with the first one. We are able to directly access the DMZ from VLAN 20. Now we're gonna do the outside to DMZ. So first we're gonna go to NAT and add a new policy. It's gonna be out to DMZ. The original packet source is outside. Destination zone here is also outside, because when the users on the outside try to access, they're going to hit the public IP address of the web server, and that IP address is within the outside zone. And the source address is any. We don't need it's any. It can be anything. And the destination address is going to be the public IP address of the web server, which is 192.168.100.233. And then we set the translation. We're going to make destination translation now, because we're going to translate the destination IP address. And static IP, we're going to translate it to the local IP address of the web server. Then next we're going to go to the security policy. We're going to add a new one. We're going to also call it out to DMZ. The source zone is outside. The source address is any. The destination zone is going to be the DMZ, where the packet is going to end. And the destination IP address is going to be the public IP address of the web server, because this is the IP address which the clients or users on the outside network or outside zone are going to be hitting when they are making requests to the DMZ server. The application, we're going to also allow only web browsing because we're using the IP address. And the action is allow, and we're going to say OK, and then commit. And now if we write the IP address 192.168.100.233, here we have the web server and we can access it. And my IP address is from the outside network. IP config. Here it is. I am on the 192.168.100 network, and I was able to access the internet. So now the outside users can also browse to the DMZ web server. And the last thing we're going to do in this lab is to allow VLAN 10's users to browse the DMZ using its public IP address. So basically the 192.168.100.233. And the way they're going to do it is that they're going to go through the firewall to the outside interface, and then they're finally going to come back to the DMZ. So they will be doing a U-turn to the DMZ. Now we're going to go back here. We're going to go to NAT. We're going to add a new NAT policy called VLAN 10 to DMZ. The source is going to be the inside zone, and the destination zone is the outside. The source IP address is VLAN 10, and destination IP address is the web server's public IP address. And then we're also going to set translation, destination translation, and we're going to translate it to the local web server's IP address. Then we're going to go back to security, and we're going to create a new security policy for VLAN 10 to DMZ. The source is the inside zone. The source address is VLAN 10's network. The destination zone, the DMZ, because that's where the packet is going to end. And the destination IP address is the public IP address of the web server, because this is what the inside or VLAN 10 users are going to be hitting. And in applications, we're going to also allow web browsing and set action to allow. Now we're gonna go to the PC of VLAN 10 and try to access the web browser with its public IP address. So we're gonna go 192.168.100.233, and it's just going around and it's not taking us anywhere. And that is because here in our NAT policies we have VLAN 10 to DMZ, but on top of it we have the VLAN 10 to internet. And if we look at it, they are very similar. They have the same source zone, same destination zone, they have the same source address, and pretty much similar destination address, because this is any and this is just more specific. So this NAT policy is taking this request before it actually gets to this last NAT policy, and we can see this from the hit count, because this is 1872 while this is still 0, even though we did more requests. So if we go here and try again, and then we refresh, this number is going to change. So 72 changed to 97. So what we need to do is to take this policy to the top and drag this one to the bottom, and then commit. Now it finished committing, and if we go back to PC1 and try to access it now, 192.168.100.233, now we're getting the DMZ web server from the inside VLAN 10 using the public IP address of the web server, which is 192.168.100.233.